Adding a CA glue, that's cyanoacrylate glue or super glue, if you don't know, makes an incredible wood finish. I've applied CA finishes to bowls, plates, stoppers, vases, all kinds of woodworking, pens, and in this case, a mechanical pencil. However, all CA glues are not the same. They're made differently, filtered differently, and have different viscosities. So before applying a CA finish, as in my go-to Starbond premium super glues, I just recommend that you take a little bit of extra time to ensure your surface preparation is the best it can be. Clean the surface with either rubbing alcohol or tack cloths. And depending on what material I'm using on the piece or what type of wood, I'll usually end my preparation with a 400 or 600 grit sandpaper. I do use HDPE bushings when applying CA finishes to pens or pencils, and I protect my lathe with a foam mat. If you don't know already, my go-to is Starbond. I am sponsored by them, and I absolutely love these products. The quality is superb, the clarity is super clear, the aerosol accelerator is by far my favorite, can't say enough about it, and the Starbond's website and customer service is fantastic. If you haven't tried out their products yet, I highly recommend that you do. Also, I have a 10% off code for you in the description below. I use shop paper towels and I cut them up into little squares to apply the CA glue. And in place of rubber gloves, which can be dangerous with the lathe, I use a small pen kit bag to cover my finger from the CA glue. I start applying 1 to 4 coats of thin CA glue, depending on the material and the absorption. With this blank, I only needed 1 coat, and you can see because it's completely shiny and covered. Depending on your shop environment, this 1 thin coat of CA will be cured in less than 10 seconds. Next, I apply a medium CA glue with no sanding in between, about 7 to 12 coats, depending on how much depth I want. My lathe speed is between 300 to 500 RPMs. I ended up using 8 coats of medium CA on this pencil with 1 to 2 shots of accelerator in between each coat. Also, in case I get sidetracked or lose coat count, I set out the 8 pieces of paper towel in advance. There's no need to use the thick CA. I have used thick CA in my process in the past because of deep hills and valleys and ripples, but I don't need to with Starbond. Now for the step that's more of an art than a science. I wet sand, I use micro mesh pads, and I use Abernet sanding sheets. You can also use these Zona paper, they work well, and you would use those in place of the micro mesh. You can see there's a good layer of buildup for CA, and there's a little swirl, but really no big hidden valleys or hills or any ripples. So depending on the severity of the swirls, I determine what Abernet grit I want to start with, and it's usually either a 400 or 600, and I only needed the 600 here. The goal, if you're new to CA finishing, is to flatten the CA surface to the shape of the item by removing the swirl marks and scratches and polishing the surface. You want to slightly shave the top surface, but not too much where you go into the blank again and then have to start all over. I'll wet sand until I feel the swirls smooth out. Stop, sand with the grain to eliminate any new swirls left by the sandpaper, and then dry the blank and inspect it. If at any time you feel like your sandpaper is sticking to the blank as you're sanding, then chances are you've gone too far. You should be left with a dull surface with no shine marks. Here I'll go through all the grits of the micro mesh or the Zona paper, wet sanding. And if at this point I see any swirl marks or any tiny little surface scratches left, I'll run through the micro mesh grits again. But usually, like this time, I only ran through them once. I also change my water out if I'm doing more than one item. That way I don't cross-contaminate any grit. Next, I'll use some type of plastic polish. This actually has an abrasive in it, so it will help any tiny surface scratches come out. And I'll either do 1 to 3 coats. Here, I only did 1 coat. And I hope this video is not too long. I just wanted to put a lot of this in real time so you can actually see me working the CA finish. After each coat of polish, I'll buff the polish out with a buffing wheel. If you don't feel comfortable using a buffing wheel on the lathe, just use some paper towels. But it's the same concept if I took this pen blank or item off the lathe and buffed it. I also turn my lathe speed to 2,000 to 2,500 RPMs. I also like to add a coat of Renaissance wax. It's a microcrystalline wax, and it helps with fingerprints, like at craft shows when people are handling your pens or pencils. Now, before assembly, for 1 year now, I've been using this jig to clean up my pen blank ends. It is awesome. It's quick, efficient, and I never have any problems. Literally, in less than a minute, I'll clean up all 4 ends with a light touch on a fine sandpaper. You can get this jig online from PSI, Penn State Industries in the US, but not all of us are going to have this set up, so you can hand sand these flat on a table as well. I hope you enjoyed this in-depth look at my current CA finish process. If you haven't already, go ahead and try out Starbond Premium Super Glues. They are awesome. Can't recommend them enough. So as always, stay safe in your shop at all times. Thank you, and take care, and Happy New Year.